When you think of tennis, there are a few names that come up, whether or not you're a fan. Novak Djokovic is one of those names. The man is a living legend of the sport and has been ranked #1 in the past. We mean 20 Grand Slams are a big deal, right? But that doesn't mean everything always goes his way. Yeah, the Serb has suffered some truly crushing defeats. Let's take a look. First up, number 8. Djokovic has lost to Dominic Thiem in the 2017 Roland Garros. He is an all-time great of tennis, but somehow the man always has a hard time at the Roland Garros, especially early in his career. Being the champ that he is, though, he powered through and finally won the Paris Major in 2016 against Andy Murray. If only the success had lasted. Yeah, it's safe to say our man entered into a huge slump for the next 2 years, in part because he wasn't mentally in the zone, and in part because of constant, small, annoying injuries. It was no secret he wasn't at his best in 2017 when he was constantly being sent home in the early rounds of big tourneys. Anyway, he still managed to make it to the quarterfinals of the 2017 Roland Garros, but unfortunately he suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Dominic. Sure, it was close in the beginning, but the Serb got worse as the match went on, losing 7-6, 6-3, 6-love. Not what you'd expect from a player of his caliber at all. This was an unexpected performance for sure, but his opponent also shocked us all. Dominic had lost to him a week earlier. Needless to say, the man got his revenge. Scoring win after win, he was able to knock 20 forehand shots past his opponent, and by the end, our Serbinator was visibly just demoralized. It was a toughie for sure, but just wait, guys. There are worse losses on the list. Following up at number 7, we have Djokovic's loss to Nadal in the 2020 Roland Garros. Honestly, the Roland Garros has not been kind to this man. That's right, guys. In 2020, Joker tasted defeat again in the Paris Major, this time at the hands of the King of Clay himself. Mind you, the man was out of his 2017 slump at this point. He was the #1 ranked player in the world, and by far the most consistent player in the 2020 season. Yeah, that's why this loss probably stung even more. The man was the favorite to win the Paris Major this time around, and for good reason. He worked his way to the finals through solid performances. Unfortunately, that only made his defeat in the final more humiliating. He was made to look helpless by Nadal, as the Spaniard put 21 winners past him and completely outclassed him. The score at the end was 6-love, 6-2, 7-5. Yikes! Yeah, it's safe to say the player didn't smile that day. Next up, number 6, his loss to Lorenzo Sonego at the 2020 ATP Vienna tournament. Alright, we did say the Serb was extremely consistent in the 2020 season, but apparently the humiliating defeats were sprinkled in there pretty nicely too. Honestly, we hate to see it. Think of it as having the world's greatest steak with sugar sprinkled on top. No thanks. Anyway, the score at the end of the 2020 ATP Vienna match against Lorenzo Sonego left us all shaking our heads at the utter destruction we witnessed. 6-2, 6-1. We know that's gotta hurt. It was a bad one for sure. The Joker got made into a joke, and he only scored 3 points the entire game. Also, this was even more surprising, as just recently, Novak had retained the #1 rank by winning the last match in the same tournament. Honestly, he just wasn't himself against Lorenzo, and he had no answer for the aggressive play of his opponent. The man failed to keep up on the serve and also the return, and only hit 7 winners the entire match. That's crazy, especially if you're ranked #1 in the world. Think about it, guys. The man he was playing had never had a single win against a top 10 player, ever. So for the Serbian champ to lose like this was just unexpected and embarrassing. But hey, we're happy for Sonego. The guy snagged his first top 10 win, and it was a big one. Coming up is number 5, Novak's loss to Dan Evans in the 2021 Monte Carlo Masters. The amount of times this man has lost in some humiliating fashion is honestly surprising. It's just not something you realize has happened when you think about how great he is as a player. Anyway, another bummer for Novak happened at the 2011 Monte Carlo Masters against a much lower-ranked opponent, England's Dan Evans. The score on this one wasn't as bad as some of the others on the list, but the context of the loss makes it really bad. The game ended 6-4, 7-5. But wait, think about it, guys. Evans was much lower ranked than Djokovic, who was supposed to be at the top of his game. But in this match, we didn't get to see it. Instead, we saw Evans placing some beautiful shots and making the Serb run around the court. The Englishman was playing some beautiful, unpredictable tennis, while the so-called Serbinator was making error after error in a lackluster performance. Evans wasn't supposed to win. This was a pretty incredible upset, and Djokovic himself described it as awful. Next up, we've got number 4. The Serbs lost to Aslan Karatsev in the 2021 Serbian Open. Yeah, if you thought Evans was the only humiliating loss for the Serb in 2021, you were wrong, even though this one was maybe not as bad score-wise. The score this match ended on was 7-5, 4-6, 6-4 for Karatsev. Now, that may not seem as bad compared with the rest of the crushing defeats on this list, but other factors made this loss so bad. That's right, the match happened in the Serbian Open, guys. It's Noel's hometown of Belgrade. He was the clear favorite to win, but as we already know, he didn't and suffered defeat at home home against a player ranked so far below him, it was almost unthinkable for the number 1 seed, Djokovic, to lose. We're guessing it makes more sense now why we placed this loss where we did. We mean, come on, losing to the 28th seed Russian would have been bad enough, but top that off with the loss being inside Serbia? Yep, this one definitely left a bitter taste in the home player's mouth. Following up, number 3, the loss to Pablo Carreno Busta in the 2020 US Open. Get ready, this is genuinely tragic and cringeworthy. Let us set the scene. It's the 2020 US Open. Djokovic is the number 1 ranked player on a crazy 29-match winning streak. He is literally close to winning his 18th Grand Slam. Well, spoiler, it didn't go well at all. It went worse than you can probably imagine, actually. Guess the score. For sure, it must have been very bad, right? The Joker must have been losing horribly, right? Well, that's not what was happening at all, and yet somehow he still lost. He was trailing behind Busta 6-5 in the first set, sure, but the whole game was ahead, and anything could have happened. Unfortunately, what did happen was that the Serbinator, true to his name, sniped the line judge with a ball to the neck. Yeah, the whole stadium had a unanimous moment of cringe. No one can deny that it was tragic and embarrassing watching the DQ loss being handed to our guy, especially when he was in such good form and en route to winning a Grand Slam. Honestly, this man needs a break from all these embarrassing losses, and we'd love to tell you that he got it, but unfortunately, life is life, and there was no break. In fact, there hasn't been a break for the Serb, who's been facing such losses for a long time. Next up, number 2, the loss to Nadal in the 2012 Monte Carlo Masters. Okay, so these two greats of the sport have been a very entertaining rivalry for years. Nadal has won some, Noel has won others, but this one was different, guys. It was a crushing defeat. All right, Djokovic was having a pretty crazy year in 2011. He had beaten the King of Clay 11 times. Can you imagine? 11 times in 1 year. And that too against a player that was also top class. Needless to say, with this record, when the two faced off in the 2011 Monte Carlo Masters, no one expected Rafa to win. Unfortunately, though, for the Serb, things didn't play out how he might have wanted. Rather than setting a new standard for domination in the sport, we got to see Djokovic being absolutely humiliated and made to look ordinary. We mean a score of 6-3, 6-1 is not a pretty sight for anyone. As horrible as this match was for the Joker, we were still excited to see the King of Clay remind everyone of his greatness. The loss to Verdasco at the 2010 Monte Carlo Masters. Apparently, the Monte Carlo Masters hasn't been kind to this man either. In a defeat even more humiliating than his 2012 loss to Nadal, he lost 6-2, 6-2 to Fernando Verdasco on the clay courts. Now, you gotta remember at this point, the Serb was already great, and he was doing pretty well in the 2010 season. As for his opponent, well, he'd never been to a Masters 1000 level semifinal game before. Yeah, no one was expecting what happened next. Verdasco absolutely demolished his opponent in the semi and took his place in the final against Nadal. That amazing final matchup that Djokovic could have had was just salt in the wound for the Serbian player. The loss was humiliating for sure. The man didn't just get outclassed, he committed 40 unforced errors. 40! That's not what you'd expect from a top-level player, and it was an embarrassing display of bad form. To top that all off, the man only scored 15 points in 8 return games. Yeah, it wasn't a good day for the Serbinator. Well, that's a wrap for this one, guys. Did we miss any humiliating losses you wanted to see on the list? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, like and subscribe. See you in the next one.